Hello, my name is Sarah and I'm 32 years old. I live in a small, cozy apartment on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado, where the Rocky Mountains paint the horizon with their majestic peaks every morning. It's a modest one-bedroom place with worn hardwood floors, mismatched furniture I've collected over the years, and a tiny balcony where I grow herbs in recycled containers. I work as a janitor at Morrison High School, a job that requires me to wake up at 4:30 a.m. to prepare the building before students and teachers arrive. To most people, I probably look like just another invisible worker, someone in a faded uniform pushing a cart down empty hallways, mopping floors that will be dirty again by lunchtime. If you've ever been betrayed by those you loved most, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're ready to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of manipulation. My daily routine is simple and predictable. I drive my 2008 Honda Civic to work, the one with the dent on the passenger side door and the radio that only works on sunny days. I spend my mornings cleaning classrooms, restocking supplies, and ensuring every corner of the school sparkles before the first bell rings. During lunch, I eat a sandwich I packed at home while sitting in the maintenance room, usually reading books about technology, coding, or business strategy. After work, I go home, cook a simple dinner, and spend my evenings in front of my laptop, immersed in a world that none of my family members know exists. But here's what they don't know, what nobody knows except my online business partners who've never met me in person. Over the past 8 years, I've built a digital empire that generates millions of dollars annually. It started as a small web development side project, creating simple websites for local businesses. But it evolved into something much bigger, a software company that develops educational platforms used by schools across the country. The irony isn't lost on me that I clean the very type of institutions that now pay my company hundreds of thousands of dollars for our learning management systems. My secret began when I was 24 and had just started working at Morrison High. I was assigned to clean the computer lab, and I became fascinated by the outdated systems the school was struggling with. I'd spend extra time after my shift learning how the computers worked, watching YouTube tutorials on coding, and reading programming books from the library. The IT teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, noticed my interest and started leaving programming books for me to borrow. He never asked questions, just quietly encouraged my curiosity. Within 2 years, I had taught myself multiple programming languages and web development. I started freelancing on weekends, building websites for $200 to $500 each. The money wasn't much, but it was the beginning of something bigger. I saved every penny, living off my janitor salary and reinvesting the freelance income into learning new skills and better equipment. The breakthrough came when I developed a simple app to help teachers track student progress. I showed it to Mr. Rodriguez, who was amazed by its functionality. He introduced me to the principal, who loved the concept. Within 6 months, I had my first major contract with the school district. From there, word spread and other districts began reaching out. I incorporated my business, hired remote developers, and expanded our services. Today, my company, CodeBridge Educational Solutions, employs 47 people worldwide, all working remotely. We've developed platforms used by over 300 school districts across 15 states. But I still wake up at 4:30 a.m., put on my janitor uniform and mop floors. Why? Because I love the anonymity, the peace of empty hallways, and the irony that I'm literally cleaning the foundation of my success. Plus, it keeps me grounded and connected to the real problems in education that my software aims to solve. The challenging part isn't running a multi-million-dollar company while maintaining my cover as a janitor. The challenging part is my family, who have never seen me as anything more than the disappointment who chose cleaning over college, the sister who couldn't make something of herself like my younger sister Victoria did. Let me tell you about my family so you understand the dynamics that have shaped my life. I grew up in a middle-class family in suburban Denver. My father, Robert, was an accountant who worked for a large firm downtown. My mother, Patricia, was a nurse at Denver General Hospital. They're good people who worked hard to provide for Victoria and me, but they've always had very traditional ideas about success and respectability. Victoria is 3 years younger than me, 29 years old, and she's been the golden child since birth. She's everything my parents dreamed of in a daughter, beautiful with flowing blonde hair and the kind of smile that lights up rooms, intelligent, having graduated summa cum laude from the University of Colorado with a degree in marketing, and successful at least in the conventional sense. Victoria works as a marketing manager for a prestigious Denver advertising agency, drives a leased Mercedes, lives in a trendy downtown loft, and her social media is filled with photos from expensive restaurants, weekend getaways to Aspen, and networking events with other young professionals. The contrast between Victoria and me couldn't be starker, at least from my family's perspective. Where she shines in social situations, I prefer quiet corners with a good book. Where she has a college degree hanging on her wall, I have a high school diploma and years of self-taught expertise that no one in my family recognizes as valuable. Where she talks about her latest marketing campaigns and office politics, I talk about, well, I don't really talk much about work at family gatherings, because what's interesting about mopping floors? The favoritism started early and never really stopped. Victoria got the bigger bedroom growing up, the newer clothes, and most importantly, the unwavering belief from our parents that she would go places. When she expressed interest in college, they eagerly helped her apply, toured campuses with her, and celebrated every acceptance letter. When I graduated high school and announced I wanted to work for a year before deciding on college, their disappointment was palpable. "Sarah, you're smart enough for college," my mother said, her voice heavy with concern. "Don't you want more for yourself than a dead-end job?" But I was already fascinated by technology and wanted to explore it on my own terms. I got the janitor job at Morrison High because it was close to home, had decent benefits, and most importantly, gave me access to computers and technology during off hours. My parents saw it as a temporary stepping stone that had somehow become permanent. After a few years, they stopped asking when I'd go to college and started making disappointed comments about my choices. Victoria, meanwhile, was flourishing. College graduation was a major celebration with extended family, professional photos, and a party at an upscale restaurant. She got her marketing job right after graduation and moved into her downtown loft within 6 months. Every family gathering became an opportunity for my parents to beam with pride as Victoria shared her latest professional achievements. "Victoria just landed a huge account with that new tech startup downtown," Mom would announce at Sunday dinners. "She's really making a name for herself in the industry." Meanwhile, my contributions to these conversations were usually limited to, "Works fine. Same old stuff." How could I explain that I just closed a $2.3 million contract with a California school district without revealing my secret? How could I share that my software was revolutionizing how teachers track student progress when my family didn't even know I could code? The secret became harder to maintain as my business grew. I had to be careful about phone calls, scheduling meetings for times when I was alone, and creating elaborate excuses for why I sometimes couldn't attend family events. I told them I was picking up extra cleaning shifts, which wasn't entirely untrue since I did sometimes work late at school to maintain appearances. The most difficult part was watching my parents worry about my future. During my 30th birthday dinner, Dad pulled me aside with a concerned expression. "Sarah, I've been thinking," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Mom and we worry about you. You're 30 years old, living paycheck to paycheck, with no retirement savings, no prospects for advancement." Victoria mentioned that her company might have an opening in their facilities management department. "It's not glamorous, but it's office work and it could be a step up." I felt a complex mix of emotions, gratitude for his concern, frustration at the assumptions, and sadness that he couldn't see the success I'd already achieved. But I couldn't tell him that my retirement savings could fund several retirements, that my company's revenue had exceeded his annual salary for the past 4 years, or that I was considering purchasing real estate investments that would make Victoria's loft rent look like pocket change. "Thanks, Dad," I said simply. "I'll think about it." The breaking point came last month, just before Thanksgiving. Victoria had been dating someone new for about 6 months, a guy named Marcus who worked in tech sales. She'd been building up to introducing him to the family, and Thanksgiving seemed like the perfect opportunity. But 3 days before the holiday, Mom called with news that felt like a punch to the stomach. "Sarah, honey," Mom began, her voice carrying that careful tone I'd learned to dread. "About Thanksgiving. Victoria asked if it could just be immediate family this year. You know, since she's bringing Marcus to meet us for the first time, and she wants everything to be perfect." I was silent for a moment, processing what she'd really said. "So I'm not immediate family anymore?" "Oh, sweetie, that's not what I meant," Mom backpedaled quickly. "It's just that Victoria wants to make a good impression, and Marcus comes from a very successful family. His parents are both doctors, and Victoria's nervous about everything being just right. She thought maybe having fewer people there would make the conversation flow better." "Fewer people meaning me specifically?" Mom sighed. "Victoria's worried that, well, you know how these things go. Marcus might ask about what everyone does for work, and it might be awkward when you mention janitorial work. Not that there's anything wrong with your job, honey, but first impressions matter, and Victoria really likes this one." I felt like I was reliving every moment of childhood favoritism, every time I'd been asked to step aside so Victoria could shine brighter. But this time was different. This time I was being erased from a family tradition because my job was considered embarrassing. "I understand," I said quietly, though understanding and accepting were two very different things. "Have a nice Thanksgiving." After hanging up, I sat in my small apartment looking at the Thanksgiving menu I'd been planning, the pie recipe I'd been excited to try, the gratitude list I'd started writing in preparation for sharing what I was thankful for. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. But I wasn't entirely alone. I had my business partners who respected my ideas, clients who valued my work, and employees who looked forward to my leadership. The irony was crushing. I was surrounded by professional respect and financial success, yet my own family saw me as a liability to be hidden away during important moments. That Thanksgiving, I didn't sit at home feeling sorry for myself. Instead, I volunteered at a local shelter, serving meals to families who were grateful for any kindness. It was there, watching genuine appreciation in the eyes of people who had lost so much, that I realized how twisted my family's values had become. These people didn't care what I did for work. They cared that I was there, helping, contributing something positive to their day. As Thanksgiving weekend passed, I found myself thinking more and more about the conversation with my mother. The anger I initially felt was transforming into something else, a clarity about what I was worth and what I deserved from the people who claimed to love me. Meanwhile, Victoria's Thanksgiving apparently went perfectly. She posted photos on social media of herself and Marcus with our parents, everyone dressed elegantly, smiling at a beautifully set table. The caption read, "Grateful for family and new beginnings." The comments from extended family and friends were full of congratulations and compliments about what a lovely couple Victoria and Marcus made. I stared at those photos, and for the first time I didn't feel envious or left out. I felt free. Free from the need to prove myself to people who had already decided my worth based on their narrow definition of success. Free from the exhaustion of hiding who I really was to protect their comfort. Free from the pretense that these people understood or valued the real me. The phone call came on the Monday after Thanksgiving. It was Victoria, and her voice was bubbling with excitement. "Sarah, I have amazing news. Marcus proposed. Can you believe it? He proposed on Sunday night, right there in Mom and Dad's living room after dinner. It was so romantic, and Mom cried, and Dad shook his hand like he was welcoming him to the family officially." I felt a stab of something, not jealousy exactly, but a deep sadness that I'd missed this moment. Despite everything, Victoria was still my sister, and I'd missed her engagement. "Congratulations," I said, trying to inject genuine warmth into my voice. "I'm happy for you." "Thanks. And Sarah, I was hoping, well, Marcus and I are thinking about a spring wedding, something elegant but not too big. I was wondering if you'd want to help with some of the setup and cleanup? You know, since you're good at that kind of thing." There it was again, the assumption that my value lay in my ability to clean up after others, to work behind the scenes while others took center stage. Victoria wasn't asking me to be a bridesmaid or even a guest with a meaningful role. She was asking me to be the help. "I'll have to check my work schedule," I said noncommittally. "Oh, and Sarah?" "Marcus works in tech sales, and he was asking about our family at Thanksgiving." I told him you work in education. It's not technically a lie, right? You do work at a school. Even in her moment of happiness, Victoria felt the need to improve my image, to make me more palatable to her new fiancé. The casual way she'd rewritten my profession, transforming janitor into works in education, revealed everything about how she really saw me. After that call, I made a decision. I was tired of being the family's secret shame, tired of diminishing myself to make others comfortable, tired of hiding my success to maintain a peace that only benefited people who didn't truly value me anyway. But I wasn't going to dramatically reveal my secret out of spite or anger. I was going to live authentically, and if that made others uncomfortable, that was their problem to solve. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks after Victoria's engagement announcement, Dad called with an unusual request. "Sarah, I need to ask you a favor, and I know it's a big one. Victoria's wedding is going to be expensive, much more than your mother and I anticipated. The venue she wants, the photographer, the dress, it's adding up quickly. Marcus's family is contributing significantly, and we don't want to look cheap in comparison." I could sense where this was heading, and I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. "We were wondering if you might be able to contribute something," Dad continued. "I know money's tight on your salary, but maybe you could help with some of the smaller costs? The flowers or part of the catering. Even a few $100s would help." The irony was almost laughable. My father was asking me to help fund Victoria's wedding while having no idea that I could probably pay for the entire event without noticing the expense. But more than that, he was asking me to sacrifice financially for a wedding where I'd been relegated to cleanup duty. "How much are you looking for?" I asked. "Well, we were thinking maybe $500 to $1,000. I know it's a lot for you, but family is family, right? And Victoria would really appreciate it, even if she doesn't know the money came from you. We could tell her it came from us." Of course. Even my financial contribution would be hidden, credited to my parents so Victoria wouldn't have to feel awkward about accepting money from her janitor sister. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time. But if you could let us know by next week, that would help with the planning." That evening, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, looking at my business's financial statements. The company had just closed the largest contract in our history, a $4.7 million deal with a Texas school district that would revolutionize their entire educational technology infrastructure. In the same week that my father was asking me to scrape together $500 for Victoria's wedding, I'd earned more money than most people see in several years. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle, about being valued, about being seen as a whole person rather than a convenient source of labor and occasional financial assistance. I decided to attend Victoria's engagement party the following Saturday. It was being held at Marcus's parents' house in Cherry Hills Village, one of Denver's most affluent neighborhoods. I'd never been to this part of town, where houses sat on manicured lots behind iron gates and circular driveways. I wore my best dress, a simple navy blue one I'd bought for work events I'd attended virtually, and drove my dented Honda through streets lined with BMWs, Mercedes, and Teslas. The contrast wasn't lost on me, but for once I didn't feel ashamed. I felt curious to see this world that Victoria was joining, this life she'd chosen that required me to be edited out. Marcus's parents' house was stunning, a sprawling contemporary home with floor-to-ceiling windows and a backyard that overlooked the city. The party was elegant but not pretentious, with maybe 40 guests mingling on the outdoor patio, sharing appetizers and champagne while jazz music played softly in the background. I found my parents near the bar, both dressed more formally than I'd seen them in years. Mom wore a dress I didn't recognize, and Dad had gotten a haircut for the occasion. They looked proud and excited, but also slightly out of place among Marcus's family and friends. "Sarah," Mom exclaimed when she saw me, though I caught the quick glance she gave my outfit. "I'm so glad you could make it. Come meet Marcus's parents." Dr. and Dr. Peterson were exactly what I'd expected: polished, confident, and gracious in the way that comes from a lifetime of social and professional success. They asked polite questions about my work, and I watched my mother's face tense slightly when I mentioned Morrison High School. "Oh, you work in education," Dr. Peterson, the mother, said with approval. "How wonderful. What do you teach?" Before I could answer, Victoria appeared beside us, radiant in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Sarah works in operations at the school," Victoria interjected smoothly. "She keeps everything running behind the scenes." It was a skillful deflection, technically accurate while avoiding the specifics that Victoria found embarrassing. I watched this linguistic dance, fascinated by how much energy my family spent managing the perception of my career. Marcus joined us, and I had my first real conversation with my future brother-in-law. He was handsome in a conventional way, with perfect teeth and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to doubt your place in the world. When he learned I worked at a high school, he launched into a story about the educational technology company his firm was trying to land as a client. "It's incredible how much schools are investing in tech these days," he said enthusiastically. "This one company we're pursuing, CodeBridge Educational Solutions, they're absolutely crushing it. Multi-million-dollar contracts, expanding nationally, really innovative stuff. The owner is supposed to be some kind of genius, though nobody seems to know much about them personally. Very private, which I respect." I nearly choked on my champagne. Marcus was unknowingly describing my company to me while my family stood there, completely unaware that he was talking about my business. The surreal nature of the moment was almost overwhelming. "That sounds fascinating," I managed to say. "Do you know much about their products?" "Some. Their learning management system is supposed to be revolutionary. Schools that implement it see dramatic improvements in student engagement and teacher efficiency. I've been trying to get a meeting with their sales team for months, but they're incredibly selective about their partnerships." I nodded thoughtfully, filing away his interest for later consideration. "Well, I hope it works out for you." The evening continued with more conversations, more careful navigation around my career, and more moments of feeling like an outsider in my own family's celebration. But something had shifted inside me. Instead of feeling diminished by their discomfort with my job, I felt amused by the irony of the situation. During the drive home, I made another decision. I was going to stop hiding who I was, but I wasn't going to do it for their validation. I was going to do it for myself, because I deserved to live authentically regardless of how others reacted. The next morning, I called my accountant to discuss something I'd been considering for months: establishing a scholarship fund for students interested in technology careers who couldn't afford traditional college education. I wanted to create opportunities for kids like I had been, smart, curious, but not following conventional paths. I also called my lawyer to discuss setting up a more robust corporate structure for CodeBridge. We were growing rapidly, and I needed better legal protection and clearer succession planning. During our conversation, I mentioned that I was considering stepping back from my janitor position to focus full-time on the business. "It's probably time," she agreed. "You've built something incredible, Sarah. You shouldn't have to hide that success anymore." But even as I planned for a more open future, I wasn't prepared for how quickly things would change. The catalyst came from an unexpected source: Marcus himself. 2 days after the engagement party, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, Marcus's voice was on the other end, professional but excited. "Hi Sarah, this is Marcus Peterson, Victoria's fiancé. I hope you don't mind me calling you directly, but I got your number from Victoria. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about educational technology." I was confused. "What about it?" "Well, you mentioned you work at Morrison High, and I've been trying to connect with schools that use CodeBridge Educational Solutions. I was wondering if your school uses their platform, and if so, whether you might know someone in the administration I could speak with about their experience." My heart started racing. Marcus was asking me to help him connect with my own company, not knowing that I was the person he'd been trying to reach for months. "Why are you interested in CodeBridge specifically?" I asked, buying time to think. "My firm represents several tech companies looking to partner with them. They're incredibly successful but also very mysterious. The CEO never does interviews, rarely appears at industry events, and their marketing is all about the product, never the personality behind it. It's like they've built this empire while staying completely anonymous." "And you find that interesting?" "I find it smart," Marcus said. "In a world where everyone's trying to be an influencer or thought leader, this person just focuses on building great products and letting the work speak for itself. It's refreshing, actually." I was quiet for a moment, processing the irony. Here was Marcus, who had essentially banned me from Thanksgiving because my job wasn't impressive enough, praising the very qualities that define my approach to business, focusing on results rather than recognition, building value rather than image. "I might be able to help you," I said carefully. "Let me see what I can find out." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen. I could easily arrange a meeting between Marcus and my sales team. I could help him land the partnership he wanted without ever revealing my connection. It would be a generous gesture toward my future brother-in-law, a way of contributing to family harmony without compromising my privacy. But as I thought about it more, I realized this might also be an opportunity for something else, a chance to reveal my true identity in a way that couldn't be dismissed or minimized. Marcus respected CodeBridge CEO sight unseen. Victoria and my parents might finally understand that success comes in many forms. I spent the next week thinking carefully about my next move. I consulted with my business partners, my lawyer, and my accountant. Everyone agreed that it was time for me to step fully into my role as CEO, to stop hiding behind anonymity and to claim credit for what I'd built. The decision became easier when Victoria called with another request. "Sarah, I've been thinking about the wedding and I have a huge favor to ask. Marcus's family is really impressed with how well organized everything has been so far, and they mentioned they'd love to hire someone reliable to coordinate some of the behind-the-scenes stuff on the wedding day. You know, making sure vendors arrive on time, handling any emergencies, that kind of thing." "You want me to be your wedding coordinator?" "Well, not officially. We're hiring a real coordinator. But you could be like her assistant, help with the setup and breakdown. It would mean so much to me, and Marcus's family would see how capable and hardworking you are." Once again, Victoria was asking me to work behind the scenes while others took credit, to be helpful but invisible, capable but not celebrated. The pattern was so ingrained that she couldn't even see how demeaning it was. "Victoria," I said slowly, "what if I told you I couldn't help with the wedding setup because I had other commitments that day?" "What kind of commitments?" "Sarah, this is my wedding. It's the most important day of my life. Surely whatever work thing you have can be rescheduled." "What if it couldn't be rescheduled? What if I had business meetings that were worth millions of dollars?" Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was the kind of laugh you give when someone says something so absurd that you assume they're joking. "Sarah, you're a janitor. What kind of million-dollar meetings could you possibly have?" There it was. The fundamental assumption that had shaped every interaction with my family for years. The belief that my job defined my worth, that my income determined my value, that my current title predicted my future potential. "You're right," I said quietly. "I am a janitor. But Victoria, what if I told you that wasn't all I was?" "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "What if I told you that for the past 8 years I've been building a technology company that's now worth millions of dollars? What if I told you that I employ 47 people and have contracts with hundreds of school districts across the country?" The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Sarah," Victoria finally said, her voice careful and concerned, "are you feeling okay? Have you been stressed about something? Because this doesn't sound like you." She thought I was having some kind of breakdown. The idea that I could be successful in a way she didn't understand was so far outside her worldview that mental illness seemed more likely than hidden competence. "I'm completely fine," I said. "And I'm completely serious. My company is called CodeBridge Educational Solutions. You can look us up online." "Sarah, this isn't funny anymore. I don't know what's going on with you, but…" "Marcus has been trying to get a meeting with my company for months," I interrupted. "He told me about it at your engagement party. He wants his firm to partner with CodeBridge Educational Solutions. He doesn't know that I'm the CEO he's been trying to reach." Another long silence. "I'm going to hang up now," Victoria said, her voice tight with frustration. "When you're ready to have a normal conversation about my wedding, call me back." She hung up, leaving me sitting in my apartment with the phone in my hand and a strange sense of liberation in my chest. I had told the truth. For the first time in 8 years, I had told a family member exactly who I was and what I'd accomplished. The fact that Victoria didn't believe me was almost irrelevant. I had stopped hiding. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I updated my LinkedIn profile to reflect my actual position as CEO and founder of CodeBridge Educational Solutions. I added a professional headshot I'd had taken months earlier but never used. I wrote a brief summary of my background, including my start as a high school janitor who became fascinated with educational technology. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages from industry contacts, potential clients, and business journalists who had been trying to identify CodeBridge's mysterious founder for years. I'd accidentally created a minor sensation in the educational technology world by simply telling the truth about who I was. But the message that surprised me most came from Marcus. It was a text sent at 11:47 p.m. "Sarah, I just saw your LinkedIn. Is this real? If so, I owe you a huge apology and I'd love to talk." I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to think about what I wanted from this conversation, from this revelation, from this new chapter of my life where I was no longer hiding my success. The next morning, Victoria called. Her voice was different, smaller, uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. "Sarah, I looked up your company online. I read about the contracts, the growth, the industry awards. I don't understand. How is this possible? Why didn't you tell us? I tried to tell you yesterday. You hung up on me. But I mean before that. Why have you been keeping this secret for 8 years? I thought about how to answer that question honestly. Because I knew how you'd react. I knew that suddenly I'd become interesting to you in a way I never was before. I knew you'd want to understand how I made money, but not how I made meaning. I knew that my worth to this family would change based on my bank account, not my character." "That's not true," Victoria protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? 3 weeks ago, you didn't want me at Thanksgiving because my job would embarrass you in front of Marcus. Yesterday, you wanted me to work at your wedding as an unpaid coordinator. But today, after seeing my LinkedIn profile, you're calling me to ask questions about my business. What changed, Victoria? Did I become a better person overnight, or did you just discover I was worth more money than you thought?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. "You're right. God, Sarah, you're absolutely right, and I hate that you're right. I've been a terrible sister. We've all been terrible to you." "You haven't been terrible," I said, feeling my anger soften. "You've been human. You've valued what society taught you to value. But Victoria, I need you to understand something. I'm still the same person I was yesterday. The only thing that changed is your perception of what I'm worth. How do I fix this? How do we fix this? I don't know yet. But it starts with seeing me as a whole person, not just a job title or a bank balance. It starts with understanding that I've been happy and successful this whole time, even when you thought I was failing." We talked for another hour. Victoria asked questions about my business, about why I'd stayed in the janitor job, about how I'd learned to code. But she also asked harder questions about how I'd felt during all those years of being overlooked, about the pain I'd experienced being excluded from family events, about the loneliness of keeping such a big secret. By the end of the conversation, we were both crying. Not tears of joy exactly, but tears of recognition, the sadness of time lost, opportunities missed, and love constrained by narrow definitions of success. "I want to tell Mom and Dad," Victoria said. "They need to know who you really are." "They can know, but I want to tell them myself." "And Victoria?" "I want them to know because it's the truth, not because it changes how they should treat me. I was worthy of love and respect when they thought I was just a janitor, and I'm worthy of love and respect now. The only difference is that now you know." The conversation with my parents was scheduled for Sunday dinner, a family tradition that had continued even through the years when I felt like an outsider. I arrived at their house with a mixture of nervousness and excitement, carrying a folder with some business documents and articles about CodeBridge that had been published in education industry magazines. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen when I arrived, preparing the pot roast dinner that had been our Sunday standard for as long as I could remember. They looked up when I walked in, and I could see the confusion and curiosity in their eyes. Victoria had clearly prepared them for some kind of revelation, but they had no idea what to expect. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Victoria said you wanted to talk to us about something important." "I do. But let's eat first. We can talk over dessert." Dinner was surprisingly normal. We talked about Dad's retirement plans, Mom's volunteer work at the hospital auxiliary, and Victoria's wedding preparations. But I could feel the anticipation building, the questions my parents wanted to ask but were holding back. After we cleared the dishes and Mom brought out her famous apple pie, I opened the folder I'd brought and spread some documents on the dining room table. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something that I should have told you years ago. I haven't been entirely honest about what I do for work." Dad frowned, leaning forward to look at the papers. "What do you mean, honey?" "I mean that yes, I work as a janitor at Morrison High School. I have for 8 years and I love that job. But it's not my only job and it's not my primary source of income." I handed them a recent article from Education Technology Weekly with the headline "CodeBridge Educational Solutions, the mystery company revolutionizing school management systems." My professional headshot was prominently featured alongside an interview I'd given just days earlier. Mom picked up the article, her eyes scanning the text. As she read, her expression changed from confusion to shock to something I couldn't quite identify. "Sarah," she said slowly, "this article, it says you're the CEO and founder of a company that made $12 million last year?" "That's correct." Dad took the article from Mom, reading silently. After a few minutes, he looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of pride, confusion, and what might have been regret. "How?" he asked simply. I spent the next 2 hours telling them the whole story. How I'd started learning to code in the computer lab I cleaned. How I'd taught myself programming languages and web development. How I'd identified problems in educational technology and developed solutions. How I'd built a company from a Arbeitsmillion freelance project into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. They listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions for clarification, but mostly just absorbing the reality that their daughter, the one they'd worried about, the one they'd seen as directionless, had been building something extraordinary right under their noses. When I finished, the dining room was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was afraid you'd love me for the wrong reasons," I said honestly. "For 8 years you've been disappointed in my choices, worried about my future, embarrassed by my job. I needed to know that you could love and respect me without knowing about the money. I needed to know that I was enough just as I was." Dad cleared his throat, his eyes red-rimmed. "Sarah, we've made terrible mistakes. We've been so focused on conventional success that we couldn't see what you were actually accomplishing. The worst part," Mom added, her voice breaking, "is that we taught you to hide from us. We made you feel like you couldn't share your achievements because we'd been so dismissive of who you were." "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," I said gently. "I'm telling you because I want us to have a real relationship going forward. I want to be able to share my life with you without editing myself to make you comfortable. Victoria, who had been quiet throughout most of the conversation, spoke up. Sarah, about the wedding. I don't want you to help with setup. I want you to be my maid of honor. I looked at her, surprised. Victoria, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You're my sister. You're successful, intelligent, and accomplished, and I've been too shallow to see it. I want you standing beside me on the most important day of my life, not hidden in the background managing logistics. The conversation continued late into the evening. We talked about hurt feelings, missed opportunities, and the pressure we'd all felt to conform to certain definitions of success. But we also talked about the future, about how we could build better relationships based on understanding rather than assumptions. As I drove home that night, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. For the first time in 8 years, my family knew who I really was. Whether that knowledge would translate into lasting change remained to be seen, but at least the pretending was over. The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of changes. The news about my identity had spread through the educational technology industry, and suddenly I was fielding interview requests, speaking opportunities, and partnership proposals. Marcus's firm did get their meeting with CodeBridge, and I personally handled the negotiations for a partnership that would benefit both companies. But the most significant change was in my family relationships. Victoria and I started having regular coffee dates where we talked about business, about relationships, about our dreams for the future. She was genuinely interested in my work, asking thoughtful questions about the challenges of running a company and the satisfaction of solving problems in education. My parents made an effort to understand my world. Dad started reading articles about educational technology, and Mom asked detailed questions about my employees and my company culture. They still worried about me, but now they worried about the stress of running a business rather than my lack of career prospects. The wedding, when it finally arrived in late spring, was beautiful. I stood beside Victoria as her maid of honor, wearing a dress that actually fit the elegant theme she'd envisioned. During her speech at the reception, Victoria surprised everyone by talking about her brilliant older sister who taught her that success comes in many forms. Marcus and I developed a professional relationship that grew into a genuine friendship. He often joked that he'd spent months trying to network his way to a meeting with me, never knowing I was sitting right there at his engagement party. His respect for my business acumen helped bridge the gap between my old family dynamic and my new reality. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in my daily routine. I made the decision to step back from janitorial work to focus full-time on CodeBridge. My last day at Morrison High School was emotional. I'd grown attached to the quiet mornings, the sense of contributing to the educational environment, and the relationships I'd built with teachers and staff. Mr. Rodriguez, the IT teacher who had first encouraged my interest in programming, threw me a small farewell party in the computer lab. When I told him about CodeBridge, he wasn't surprised. "I always knew you were destined for something special," he said. "You had that curiosity, that drive to understand how things work and how to make them better. I'm just glad I could play a small part in your journey." As I cleaned out my locker for the last time, I reflected on how much that job had meant to me. It wasn't just the paycheck or the access to technology, it was the grounding, the connection to the problems I was solving through my business, the reminder that meaningful work comes in many forms. 6 months after revealing my secret, I was invited to speak at the National Educational Technology Conference. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of educators, administrators, and technology professionals, I told my story. I talked about starting as a janitor who was curious about computers, about teaching myself to code in empty classrooms, about building a company while mopping floors. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people approached me afterward to share their own stories of unconventional paths to success. Teachers who had become entrepreneurs, custodians who had invented solutions to problems they encountered at work, cafeteria workers who had started their own businesses. I realized that my story wasn't unique. It was part of a larger narrative about the potential that exists in unexpected places. That experience inspired me to launch the second phase of my career mission, the CodeBridge Foundation, dedicated to providing technology education and entrepreneurship training to people in non-traditional career paths. We started offering free coding classes at community centers, vocational schools, and even high schools where current janitors, cafeteria workers, and maintenance staff could learn new skills during their breaks. The Foundation's first scholarship recipient was Maria, a night shift cleaner at a downtown office building who had taught herself web design on her phone during breaks. With our support, she was able to start her own digital marketing business serving small local companies. Watching her succeed reminded me why I'd fallen in love with technology in the first place: its power to transform lives and create opportunities. As I write this, it's been a year since I revealed my secret to my family. Victoria and Marcus are happily married and expecting their first child. She calls me for business advice now, and she's considering starting her own marketing consultancy with my encouragement and guidance. My parents and I have developed a new rhythm in our relationship. They're proud of my success, but more importantly, they've learned to value the qualities that made that success possible: persistence, curiosity, empathy, and the willingness to work hard without needing recognition. I still live in my small apartment, though I've upgraded to a nicer neighborhood with mountain views. I still drive a Honda, though it's a new one without any dents. I've learned that having money doesn't require abandoning the values that helped me earn it: simplicity, authenticity, and focus on what truly matters. CodeBridge continues to grow. We now employ over 100 people across 3 countries, and our software is used in more than 500 school districts. But I measure our success not just in revenue or contracts, but in the emails I receive from teachers who tell me our platform has made their jobs easier, and from students who've engaged more deeply with learning because of tools we've created. The most gratifying message came from a teacher at Morrison High School, my old workplace. She wrote to tell me that the district had just implemented our new learning management system, and she was amazed to discover that the woman who used to clean her classroom had created the software that was now revolutionizing her teaching. "I always wondered why our classrooms were so perfectly organized," she wrote. "Now I know it was because you understood education from the ground up. Thank you for seeing possibilities where others might have seen just problems to solve." As I sit in my new office, a bright space with windows overlooking the mountains, I often think about the 8 years I spent hiding my success. While I don't regret protecting myself from judgment, I'm grateful for this chapter where I can live openly, where my family knows who I am, where my work can inspire others who might be building their own hidden successes. The little girl who grew up feeling overlooked has become a woman who creates platforms to help others be seen. The janitor who cleaned up other people's messes has become a CEO who solves systemic problems. The sister who was excluded from family dinners has become the aunt who will teach her niece or nephew that success can look like anything you build with purpose and persistence. My story doesn't end with revenge or dramatic vindication. It ends with integration, the bringing together of all the parts of myself that I once felt I had to keep separate. The janitor and the CEO, the overlooked daughter and the respected entrepreneur, the woman who mops floors and the woman who builds the future of education. I learned that you don't have to choose between humility and success, between service and leadership, between being grounded and reaching high. You can be all of those things simultaneously if you stay true to your values while refusing to limit your potential. The empty chairs at family dinners have been filled again, but this time with people who see me completely. The secret that once felt like a burden has become a bridge, connecting my past struggles with my current purpose, my hidden pain with my visible triumph, my private success with my public mission to help others write their own stories of unexpected achievement. And sometimes, late at night when I'm working on a particularly challenging problem or reviewing applications for foundation scholarships, I think about that 24-year-old woman in a janitor's uniform, staying after her shift to learn programming on outdated computers. I want to tell her that every moment of doubt, every family dinner where she felt invisible, every assumption about her limitations was just fuel for the fire she was building. I want to tell her that success isn't about proving other people wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about believing in your potential even when no one else can see it, working toward your vision even when you're working alone, and staying patient with the process even when the results take years to show. Most of all, I want to tell her what I now know to be true, that the person who sees your worth doesn't always have to be someone else. Sometimes it just has to be you.